In this lesson, we're going to learn how to animate and create a growing effect for an object that crosses itself multiple times. So here's where we left off, and so we just finished our left curly's grow, so we can lock that layer. And let's take a look at this lower curly layer here. Now, as we can see, this is a single continuous line, so we're not going to need multiple layers. However, we are going to need quite a lot of masks. So let's begin this by grabbing our pen tool and drawing out the initial mask. So this is going to be the stroked mask, so we want to make sure to get this right in the middle of our path here. So just take your time, and again, if you ever need to add one, you can just simply click on the line again, and then Control, click and drag that. And of course, Control, click and drag to select the last point in the curve to continue drawing it. So we want to get this, of course, very close to the original curve, because the closer we are, the better our animation will look. So feel free to take your time. I'm kind of moving through this a little quickly because we've sort of been watching curve drawing for the last few lessons, so I'm sure by this point you're kind of tired of seeing it. So I'm going to try to get through it as quick as possible so we can get back to the interesting stuff. So we're almost done here, and once we finish this off, we'll be able to begin dealing with the obvious overlapping problems. So now that we've finished our main limb mask, and since we're going to be having a ton of masks on this, let's call this main limb. And we'll go to our effects, and let's go to the first frame of our animation here. Just hit the home key, and let's drop on our stroke reveal. Okay, so we've got a really nice animation of this revealing on, but as we've seen before, we have the usual crossover issues. So we're going to need to create masks wherever this is happening. So let's just scrub through our animation until it crosses over the first time. It's right about here. So now we need to draw in our two masks to cut this out. Again, just using the pen tool. So this first mask we obviously want to subtract, and the rest of these masks we're going to want to subtract as well. So let's draw these out. So there's our first cut. And you always want to zoom out to make sure, because looking at it on a per pixel basis is kind of difficult. So we need to just increase the size of that mask just a little bit on both sides, because, whoops, and make sure we don't move the layer, but are instead moving the masks. Okay, that looks pretty flawless, so now let's move on and animate this turning off. So for these two masks here, we want to animate their expansion, so let's figure out when this crosses itself again. So right here is the frame right before we want to turn off the right mask. So set a key, go down one frame, negative expansion, set a key, down one frame, negative expansion. Let's take a look at this. So that was a pretty big grow. So we can reveal both of these on the same frame. So let's just grab these two keys, move them back, grow, grow, grow. Okay, good. So now we have the first mask finished here. So we can always just preview this animation. Okay, first one's looking good, so let's continue on and do the next one. So we'll just need to find the next one, and I'm going to hit M here to sort of hide my masks. Now let's come in here and draw two more masks. So as you can see, it's kind of a tedious exercise, but what we get is we get a really nice, clean result. So I consider the time we have to invest doing this cleanup to be worth it. Now, of course, if this was an unimportant object inside of our scene, or you just didn't want to deal with this, I can definitely see how you could probably overlook this or simply cover this up with motion blur, although the motion blurring does not actually work with the stroke effect. But I really think that sort of investing the time will make this a much nicer piece. So let's go to our masks again, find the correct frame right about when this is going to hit, set a key, go forward a frame, and make sure we're actually on the correct mask expansion here. But I think we'll be able to grow out both of these. So key, negative, and looks good. Alright, so 2 frames later we have our next masking. So this one's going to be a little bit difficult because it's a very small area, so we need to be sure to make small masks because we just want to cut this out for essentially 3 or 4 frames. But we definitely need to continue on. Alright, looks good. As you can see, it fills in almost immediately. So let's take these expansions and turn them off. So we'll key both, turn them both off because this is a relatively short area. So you can see there. Just go forward until we have our, I believe this is the last one we have to do. So as you can see, we've got quite a few masks going on. But sometimes that's the price to pay for clean looking motion graphics. So again, we'll just draw out the mask and set it to subtract, draw out its sister mask, set it to subtract, and animate them off whenever they overlap again. So I'm just going to move this in a little bit. Alright. Let's go forward a few frames, and it looks like this is going to be the last frame before it needs to get back on. So key the expansion, next frame, turn the expansions to negative, and there we go. I think that's it. So this was obviously an exercise in masking, masking, masking. And as you can see, we ended up with 8 different masks. But at the end of this, we ended up with a pretty beautiful animation. So as you can see, it looks flawless. It looks like it's getting drawn on perfectly. And while it was a lot of work to get this done, what we end up with is a very nice result. So let me just talk a second if we want to increase the duration of this. Well, instead of changing the original keyframes here, which we do not want to do, because if we move these stroke keyframes, all the rest of our animation is going to break. So instead of doing that, we can turn on our controls here and stretch this. So we can either stretch it up or stretch it down, and that will hopefully keep everything together. Now we still have to be careful here because this does have the possibility to change or modify our timing, so you still want to scrub through after doing that, but most of the time it gives us a nice result. See here, we need to just modify a key to be a frame or 2 later. Okay. That one looks pretty good. Okay, the rest of them look good. So we've just simply modify this duration so that it takes a little bit longer, so we can sort of look at this a little bit longer. And all we had to do was modify a single set of keys instead of all 8 set of keyframes. Okay, so now that we have this one finished, we can press U to hide this layer and lock it. And now we only have a few more layers to go. So in the next lesson, we'll continue working on some of these more complex pieces. For the next few lessons, it's going to be very similar to what we've done in the past. So if you want to jump ahead, feel free. We're going to be using some new techniques on this ornate piece here, but the next lesson we'll work on this curly piece, and it's going to be pretty much the same as we have been doing. So we'll start that in the next lesson.